What's up, everybody? Welcome to Take No Offense, a couple of old friends who grew up together in central Pennsylvania. Now we live on opposite sides of the country. This is our chance to get together weekly to share our thoughts on politics, sports, movies, and TV. I'm Eric Messersmith in the LA area, Brian Johnson in suburban Washington, D.C. What's up, buddy?
Not much, dude. I'm glad you mentioned the Central. Did you see our old friend Paul Griffin posted the 5 points of Benji's bow wow?
Yes, that is an Altoona thing. If you
It
know, you
is.
know.
No, well, the thing I wanted to ask you is just the memories of the five-way stop sign. Just the
Yes.
confusion.
Right outside my house, my childhood home there on Fifth Avenue in good old Altoona, PA.
I mean, it was never that busy, but if you got more
No,
than two cars there at one time, it was chaos.
yeah, you really needed a roundabout there. I think I feel like that would have been the thing. I don't think we had any roundabouts in Altoona though growing up. I don't
I'm good, dude.
remember
I
any.
just had to mention it because when he posted that, I just the
That
funny
was funny.
memories, man.
Yeah, some of our friends, Brian posted on Facebook that we're doing the show again. This is the reboot, and some of our friends were interested to talk about it and find out whatever they could about where they could find us on YouTube and of course as well on Apple Podcasts. So
Yeah.
Brian, let's get right into it this week. So we've got the Louisiana law regarding the 10 commandments in schools. So Louisiana passed a law signed by the governor that every school, kindergarten, all the way, I believe, through college, is going to have post the 10 commandments in every public school. This was struck down as unconstitutional when it was tried by, I believe it was Kentucky back in the 70s. I think it was a 1980 Supreme Court case, but a new conservative Supreme Court, who knows what they may decide. So I know you, as a very, very religious man yourself, you have some strong thoughts on this.
I do, and I appreciate the sarcasm there. When I saw this on Facebook, which is where I saw it, I saw a post on Facebook. I thought it was a joke. Like I really did. That my first instinct was like, stop. Like this is not real. And then I went to AP, which is still, a valid source of information. And I found out that it was real. And so if you want me to know my immediate reaction, it was the Smashing Pumpkins bullet with butterfly wings. Despite all my rage, I am still just a rat in a cage. Like I was so angry. I think I found it and I texted you immediately.
Now, why? Tell me why, though, because as you mentioned, you're not a religious fellow. But why specifically does this get you so amped up?
Well, since that time has gone by, whenever this was, I don't know, it was earlier last week, it was shortly after I show. I've had some time to calm down, and I really want to try to be measured about this. I just don't feel like I can be. And what I mean by that is that if you are a religious person, regardless of what it is, if you're a Christian, if you're a Muslim, if you're Jewish, whatever, Hindu, good for you, man. Like those are your choices and you made them, and I'm happy that you're happy. But as a parent, the joke I made to you was if this happened in Maryland, I would go crazy. It's almost like I would pull my kid out of public school and put him in a private, non-religious school. Oh, wait, I already did, because that's how much I don't want my children, and this is where it gets harsh, indoctrinated by religion.
Yeah.
And I'm going to measure that carefully and just say, look, I go back to what I said at the beginning. When my kids grow up and they become young men, they're free to make their own choices about religion, whatever that may be. So I don't know what it is about the way I grew up, what I think about religion in general. I don't know if it's a fear. I don't know if it's a rational fear or not, but I'm very afraid of my children coming home from the mall and telling me about the e-meter they learned about from a Scientologist.
Yeah. Look, I think when you talk about these things, there's two conversations. And the first one is what I mentioned earlier. Is it constitutional? And that really depends on the makeup of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said no in 1980. But we're 44 years later. We have a very conservative Supreme Court, as we saw with things like Roe versus Wade. Precedents can be overturned. So I think it's very possible this court may rule differently. And I might be okay with that in terms of the constitutionality, because if you read the Constitution, what it says is the government can't establish a religion or stop someone from engaging in their religion. That's what it says. Now, it's been interpreted more broadly to mean government can't promote religion, but that's not actually what the Constitution says. So I think there's a legitimate legal debate about whether or not something like this is constitutional. But to me, the more
what if your kid isn't Christian and you're sending them to school in Louisiana?
Well, that gets to my second point.
Like, why don't we put the whatever they got in the Quran? Why don't we throw that up there?
Right. Well, that gets
or give
to my
Tom Cruise's posters. I mean, what are we doing?
Right. Well, and that's the second argument, which is, okay, putting aside the constitutionality, which I think is a different argument. Is it correct policy? And in there, I think the answer is unequivocally no, it is not. Whether it's constitutional or not, whether this Supreme Court or any says it is or not, and we'll find out because the ACLU's already challenged it. I assume it will someday in the not too distant future go before the Supreme Court. But regardless of what they decide, this is a really bad idea, because we are a nation not founded on any particular religion, despite what some people say. Yeah. We are not a Christian nation. We are a nation of people who are Jews or Buddhists or Muslim or atheists or agnostics or people who just don't care about religion. We're all of that. And so to pick a particular religious tradition, which would be, I guess, Christianity and Judaism here as well with the Ten Commandments, and to hold that up as kind of some ethical standard and not do the same thing for other religions, old or new, as you mentioned. So Scientology is, I guess, a religion. I think they have tax exempt
They don't pay
status.
Taxes.
As crazy as that is, in my opinion, based on what I know about Scientology. So my point is, it's not the right thing to do. Public schools should not be about in any way pushing a religious agenda or trying to indoctrinate a religious agenda.
Yeah.
Now, look, I'm okay with I'm not an absolutist on pretty much anything. So to me, there is a line. This crosses the line, in my opinion.
No pun intended.
Yeah, I know, right? But something like a prayer before a football game in a locker room, that went before the Supreme Court a few years ago. I'm okay with that.
No.
I'm a non-denominational prayer. I'm okay with that. It doesn't cross my personal line. This is different, though, because this is a specific religious tradition with specific rules right there for everyone, regardless of whether they opt in to see it or not. So I'm opposed.
Yeah, you're talking and I'm still trying to feel out where all my anger is coming from. So I'm going to make just two more points on this. I think my second point is going to be like on some of the things that you said. It's why I don't want prayer anywhere near my kid. I don't want it. I just don't. So much so, and if people turning in for the first time, they're going to learn a lot about me. I don't like the national anthem before a baseball game. I especially don't like it before a National Football League football game, because that's not what those things are about. Not because I don't like those things. And I feel like I have to defend myself a little bit. I was a United States Marine during 9/11. Like, I love my country. But the reason I love my country is this conversation that we're having right now. Not because of apple pie and prayers and pledges and going to church. That's not why I love America. I love America because of this conversation. That's my second point. And I know a lot of people aren't going to like that, but I feel very strongly about it, obviously. My last point that I will make on this has to do with the debates and Trump and this next election. This is a preview of what we are headed for. These types of just things that we thought died in 1970.
Yeah.
They're coming back, buddy. Like, if you would have told me during the height of Barack Obama that Roe v. Wade would be overturned and we'd have prayer in schools, I would have laughed out loud. it seemed like impossible. And here we are.
Here we are.
So buckle
You're
up,
right.
man, because it's coming.
You know, it is. And I think you get into an area where I think we're going to talk a lot more about this in the coming months. One of the things about this presidential election that's so interesting, I think because these candidates are so well known and they have so much baggage and there's so much going on with both of them at any given moment, we really talk about that and the past, and we don't really talk about the future a lot in this campaign, which usually that's what presidential elections are about. Usually it is about a candidate coming in, a challenger, and being like, hey, I want to do these things. Here's what I want to here's my platform, why things are going to be better.
Trump posted what's on his platform. If you'd like to walk down a nightmarish road, I suggest you take a look.
But here's what Trump, if you listen to Trump speak, because I think we have to make a distinction here. What comes from his campaign? And in that regard, he is very unique as a challenger. Typically, the challenger is very specific and lays out policy. I mean, that's what usually happens. Mitt Romney did that when he was a challenger. You know, you had Barack Obama when he was running the first time, did that. That's typically what presidents do. That's not what Trump does. What Trump does is he lays out a few broad, very general things like, I'm going to deport immigrants. I'm going to be tough on the border. I'm going to cut taxes, right? But he doesn't get into the weeds. He doesn't
know the weeds, Eric.
He doesn't know them and he doesn't care. And that's not what he's about. He's clearly not a details guy. So what you hear from him in his campaign is very light on specifics. But what you're talking about, which I think is what the Biden administration has to hammer home, is the people around Trump, the people that he's going to bring to Washington this time around, that he's going to empower in important positions in his administration. They are very specific in what they want, unlike Trump. And now, will Trump go along with it? Who knows?
Well, here's the thing.
Changes his mind on
no, I was going to say.
But to your point, if he does, it is very scary in a lot of ways. And you're pointing out one in particular, which is they are going to push a Christian conservative morality as far as they can, as far as Trump will let them and the courts and Congress will let them in a future Trump administration. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like I said, man, I want to try. And I mean, there's so much here that I could discuss or could talk about, but I don't want to bury myself too deep in a hole. Because I mean, I know that religion is important to a lot of people. And again, I would like just to come back to, I do think that communal organizations, community centers, whether it be a church or a synagogue or a mosque, some of these places do amazing things for their communities. I think they're acting with really the best interest of their people and their communities involved. It just comes down to choice for me. If it's not a choice that you make as an individual, and I don't feel like that people like me are any longer the extreme minority of people. Like we still may be in the minority, but there are a lot of people that I know that very much are in camp with my family and how we are. And I think I get so emotional about it, Eric, because to me, it's almost like an insult to someone's intelligence. Meaning that you can't be an inherently good, and you know how much I hate good and bad, but like when you view things through this prism, you can't be an inherently good person if you don't have some form of religion in your life. Like, to me, that's insane.
Like, well, then I don't know. We're both bad. We're both bad people. Which may be true, what I mean. But it's not because we don't have religion. God.
That's what I'm saying is like, that's laughable. And I don't need to belabor it to the extent that, you know, some folks like Bill Maher do. I don't think you need to attack religion. And that's what I want to be clear on. I'm not attacking religion. I think it has a place in our culture. I think it plays a very important role in our culture in a lot of ways. I just don't think it belongs in a public school.
I agree. And I think you can be religious and have that opinion. You know, you can be religious yourself or support religion and see the benefits of it, while at the same time saying, hey, I don't think this is a good idea to have a specific religious document in a public place, particularly with young, impressionable children. I think you can hold those thoughts in your head at the same time. Yeah. All right, you mentioned the debate, Trump Biden. It's coming up Thursday night, Brian. The first of only 2 scheduled debates. What do you? First of all, we know that you'll be watching, right? What do you hope to see? What do you expect to see? Will anything happen make a difference, do you think? Give us a preview of what you're looking for.
I like it how you announce it like it was Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. Like it almost does have like this boxing quality type of thing to it. I mean, I've spent the first part of this show like besmirching Trump and all the bad things about him. Well, what you just said is the good part about him. He does bring people in. Like there was a time where I remember this specifically. I wished that there were more people who weren't normally involved in politics would become more involved in politics. And I immediately came to regret that. Like that was a bad decision.
Yes.
But my larger point is Trump does bring eyeballs. He does bring people in. I think that is a great thing. I don't know what really to predict in these debates. I honestly probably won't be able to stomach the entire thing because when Trump debated Hillary specifically, I knew that I could, like, I had a hard time. I turned it off. I did. And then when he was debating Biden, it was bad, but it wasn't as bad as the first time around. I don't know if I had just become like, I don't know if climatized is the word.
Yes.
Climatized.
Desensitized.
Yeah, desensitized to him. But I became desensitized. I don't know if I'm going to be able to stomach the entire. Are you really going to watch the whole thing, man? Are you going to watch it?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh my God.
I mean,
for you. You should get a medal.
Like, no, as a political junkie and someone who really, cares about this. Also, I do another podcast where I make
that's right.
Small amount of
Eric,
money.
what's the name of your other podcast?
So the other podcast is called Everybody Settle Down.
Everybody Settle Down. That's right.
Yes, and you can find that on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast.
Who's your co-host?
Charlie Marlowe from St. Louis, Missouri. Yeah,
good for Charlie.
We talk about politics specifically every week and sometimes multiple times a week. Like this week, coming up with a debate. So anyway, but even if I wasn't doing that podcast, I still would watch it because I love politics so much. This is how much of a nerd I am. Today I had a little bit of free time and I went back and watched about 20 minutes of the Biden-Paul Ryan debate, vice presidential debate in 2012.
Wow.
And the thing that's so striking about that is how much different Biden was in 12 years ago.
What, his vigor?
He just had those people who say the age concerns are overblown, I would just encourage you to go watch that from 2012. Now, again, I want to be clear.
Dude, how many views did the Paul Ryan Joe Biden debate have on YouTube?
Oh, I don't remember, but probably quite a few, I'm sure.
Really?
Oh, yeah, because it's been out there for 12 years. So it's been, it's been out there for quite a while. But Biden was very good in that debate. And Biden, look, in 2020, when he was much older and much closer to the current version of Biden we see, he did pretty well. In fact, I would say he won that first debate with Trump. And so I said this before, and look, maybe you're going to look back and say I'm a fool. I think Biden is going to show up and do really well. He does well in these big moments. Even this version of Biden, which is clearly diminished from what he used to be, as I mentioned with that, if you go back and watch that 2012 debate, he's not the same guy on a day in, day out basis. There's no doubt about that. But he can still bring it when he needs to. He did it at the State of the Union. He's going to do it, I think, on Thursday against Trump. And Republicans really walked into a trap, Trump and specifically Republicans in general, by overplaying their hand on the age issue with Biden. It's an issue, and you should bring it up if you're Trump, and you should hit him on it. But they have gone so far to the extreme of this guy's a walking vegetable. He doesn't know where he is. His brain is damaged. He's totally confused. Well, here's the thing about when you say that kind of stuff. If the guy shows up and he is fluid on these issues, and look, if Biden is right or close to right, he knows these issues way better than Donald Trump does. Because as we've talked about, Trump is incredibly surface level. Trump has like 2 lines on any issue. And when you get him beyond that, he's like a guy who can't swim in the deep water looking for the sides of the pool. Like he has no clue. Whereas Biden does. And if Biden still has it, which I think he will not only hold his own in this debate, but I think there's a decent chance that again, the camps are going to say their guy won. We know that. The spin meisters on both sides already made up their mind. But
I like that,
the
spin meister.
neutral people or people close to the middle, I think will score to Biden win. That's my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's what's going to happen. So I think Biden needs to show up and show that he has the ability and the mastery of policy that Trump really doesn't. And there's a lot of issues he can go to. And also, he needs to paint that picture that you and I talked about earlier of, okay, you may remember 2017, 18, and 19 fondly, right? You may remember that we had a good economy, which we did. Inflation was low, which it was. But two things. First of all, remember what happened in 2020. Donald Trump was not the president for 3 years, despite what he wants you to believe. He was the president for 4 years, and 2020 was a shit show. Now, was that all his fault? Of course not. He didn't invent COVID. But he was fired from his job as president in large part because people looked at how he handled that and said, this is chaos. This guy's up here telling you to take hydrochloroquine, and he's talking about chugging bleach, and he has no real plan to deal with this. This guy was a disaster in a time of crisis. He wasn't president for 3 years. He was president for 4, and he was fired. So that's the first point you need to make. And the second point is what you said earlier. He will be even worse this time because the first time he was constrained. The Republican Party, the establishment party, was very strong. Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan were there. And the people in his administration were serious, for the most part, people who had a reputation outside of Trump and an agenda outside of Trump, and they constrained him. That will not be the case in another Trump term. Those people are gone or not empowered anymore. And he will ride in with his true believers, who in many ways are crazier than he is. And he will be the one trying to contain them. Like, it's going to be a completely different term than his first term. And those are the arguments I think Biden needs to make. For Trump, I think he needs to hit the economy, inflation, immigration, his strengths, and also seem presidential, because that's his weakness. And if you remember that first debate in 2020, he was all over the place, interrupting Biden constantly. I think that debate really hurt him, that first debate.
Yeah.
He did not seem presidential, even though at that time he was the president.
That was the Biden, come on, man.
Right. I think he'll be more measured. I think Trump will try to rein it in this time. I think he knows he went too far in that first debate in 2020 and that hurt him.
I don't think he does know that. I really don't. Well, that's the beautiful part about the man. I don't know what he's going to do. He might come out there in a American flag Speedo with an AK-47. No, it would be an American rifle if he did come out there. So take that back. I don't know what he's going to do, man. I have no idea. But I did go and look. The Paul Ryan, Joe Biden debate between like 4 different videos has less than 1 million views.
Well, that's still a lot.
No, I mean, I guess if you consider that
have.
the Hawk Tua girl has 1 billion views this week, I guess 1 million, it doesn't seem like as much.
That's hilarious. If you don't know what we're talking about, just go ahead and search that. The Hawk Tua girl has become like the hit of the summer right now.
It won't matter by next week.
Well, it's gotten more traction than I thought it would. I don't know what it says about our culture that the Hawk Tua girl.
It says about our culture what I've been saying in every podcast we have, and I only mention it because I'm telling you the debates don't matter, Eric. They don't mean anything.
Yeah.
Things have lost meaning. Things that were once important don't mean anything anymore.
No, you're right. And that's probably the same with the debate. Because a lot of people are going to not watch it, or they'll be doing something. They'll be scrolling on X, looking at the Hawk Tua girl video while they're watching it. And so they'll get their opinion of it through other media, through podcasts, through clips that they see. And so to that degree, I think you're right that these things that used to be big events that really swung opinion. I mean, the conventions too. The conventions used to be
there
like
would be polls the next day, like he moved 3 points, and she moved 9 points.
You get big swings from the conventions because they were like 4-night infomercials for the party, and all the networks covered them in prime time, and we didn't have other options. There was no internet or no social media, and so they really moved the needle. But I think you're right. I think these big events just really don't have.
No, they don't. Dude, think about how inconsequential the Republican primaries were. Like
Yeah.
no one cared about the Republican primaries at all. It was a foregone conclusion. And that's pretty rare that that happens. I mean, in our lifetimes, I remember both Democrat and Republican um, nominations and going through the process and watching those debates and listening to the candidates. And, it was always the same thing. They attacked each other for months and then they all kissed and made up at the end to unify the party and chose a running mate. It was all BS, but, it was my largest point is, and this, it actually meant something back at then. Where
Yeah.
now, dude, the only thing that mattered was media. That's all that mattered. Media is
I
all that mattered.
Well, yeah, I still think there are enough people out there like the undecideds or the leaners or the people that aren't quite sure. And I actually, sadly, because a lot of them maybe aren't super informed, but I put my faith in them because I think to them events do matter. To most people, they don't because they've already made up their mind who they're going to vote for. They're on a team, and there's literally nothing that could change their mind. I mean, they're literally anything could happen, and they're either voting for Trump or they're voting for Biden, and that's it. But there's that pretty large group in the middle. I've talked about them before. A lot of the double haters who really don't like either candidate and aren't sure who they're going to vote for, or considering RFK Jr. or not voting at all.
What
Those
would
people,
have to
events
happen,
matter.
Eric, for me to vote for someone who tried and attempted a coup? Like, that's what you're talking about. Like,
Well,
I
but
am
I'm
a
not
double
talking about.
hater. I'm the great example of a double hater. But
Well,
dude, you're like, what
I
are
want
we
to be clear.
doing? What is happening? Like,
But
what are
you
you
and I have talked
talking
about this
about?
before. There's two kinds of double haters. There's the double haters who don't really like either choice, but understand it's a binary choice and still are clear on which one they want.
Okay.
You and I would be in that group.
Okay.
But there's other people who are double haters who really aren't sure because they don't like either, or they like RFK Jr., or they don't really follow politics that closely. Those are the people who events will matter to. Those are the people who are going to decide this election. I'm not saying it's a big group, but in a close election, which this, by all indications, is going to be, that matters. All right, Brian, switching gears, the world of sports. Let's talk a little soccer. COPA America, which is a tournament involving the U.S. men's national team and 15 other countries from North, Central, and South America, is going on right now in these here United States. Team USA won their first match in the group stage. They have two left. It looks likely, not certain, but likely they will advance to the knockout round in the quarterfinals. And Team USA is actually, you were telling me, because I didn't watch myself, but you were telling me Team USA is actually pretty decent.
Yeah. Well, I mean, before I mentioned Copa America to you today, had you ever heard of the Copa America?
I knew it was going on, and I did see that America won, but I have not or won't have watched a second of it. I can't say I won't watch a second of it. I'm one of those people, like, if the U.S. gets to the quarterfinal and it's a big match on at a convenient time and the knockout round, I probably will watch some of that. That's kind of my level of fandom.
I got you. Did you ever play soccer as a kid?
Yeah, I mean, as a little kid, yes.
Oh,
like
small
a very
child.
young child.
Like
yeah.
second, third grade?
Yeah.
Oh.
Not after that.
Well, I mean, I only asked because like I played 1 year of high school soccer and I wasn't very good. But I ran around a little bit and it's a fun sport, but I didn't really follow it. I mean, soccer was not popular when we were young children. And, because of that, most of our great athletes went into basketball or football or baseball, the more traditional sports that we have that are popular in America for financial reason or other. But over in our lifetimes, buddy, American soccer has really come a long way. And, this is my opportunity to tell people that, soccer is a growing, very popular sport. I mean, I don't know how it is out there in Santa Monica, but where I live here in this area, I mean, every weekend, man, the soccer fields are full to the brim with small children and big children and games. I mean, you can really see that the popularity of the game among young people has come a long way from when we were kids. That's why I asked the question. And so with that in mind, over this last 20, 25 years, we've had somewhat, a real focus on soccer. I mean, MLS having club teams now for like youth teams is a huge deal. And America, to be clear, America's never won a Copa America. In fact, they've only advanced, I believe, to the knockout stage twice. So this is the first time in it forever, which is a large span of time, that the U.S. has a real chance. And for people that don't really follow soccer, so the Copa Americas is North and South America. So obviously, well, I say obviously, but if you follow the sport, it is obvious. Argentina and Brazil and, other South American teams have really dominated the Copa Americas for a long time. And, this is leading up to a World Cup. So, I mean, if you don't hate America, and I clearly love America, I'm going to be cheering for the USA in Copa
Yes, you love
America.
America, just not the national anthem.
That's
but
correct.
I think that's what there's no
I'm
questions.
fine with the national anthem when it's Team USA.
Okay, all right. Good. I think since our youth, so like late 90s to today, no sport has grown more in America than soccer. In fact, I don't even think it's close. I mean,
Really?
soccer's growth has been astronomical.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, compared to pretty much every other sport, to the point where it is now a major sport in this country with MLS and with the interest in the men's and women's national teams. Yes.
PGA golf. Exponentially more popular today because of Tiger Woods in terms of money and viewers and everything else.
Yeah.
Golf always had a niche following. Golf was popular. I understand that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm talking in terms of growth. I'd have to look at the numbers. But when you said that, I immediately thought of golf as like probably the sport that has grown the largest.
It has grown. I think a lot of that growth, though, was tied into Tiger. And so now that he is
of
gone,
course.
Like the PGA Tour, I'm not saying they're struggling, but they're the cachet of the PGA Tour. Hell, that's why they needed to have that private equity investment from all these sports owners. And that's why they're negotiating with Saudi Arabia and a rival league in Live, nearly put them under.
Yeah.
I mean, they are really struggling in that regard. That's why
I
they're
distracted
make a deal
you.
with Liv.
I'm sorry.
But your point is well taken. That certainly while Tiger was there, golf did explode from being like a country club elitist sport to being more of an everyman sport. That is certainly fair. But anyway, my point is to get to the next level for soccer, because it's already at a pretty damn high level and ascending. I think that's the final step, is getting the men's national team. Because look, there's a reason that we had this whole debate about women being paid. There's a reason the women were paid much less than the men, because the men's World Cup makes exponentially more money than the women's World Cup. And the reason for that is
because of the world. The reason is the world.
The world cares about men's sports more than women's sports. And that's true, I think, in America too, to a lesser extent, but it's true. And so it's great that our women's team has been so good for so long, except in this last World Cup. But we need the men's team. They don't have to win the World Cup or events like this, but they've got to be in the fight. They've got to be challenging for it. Like, remember how excited people got with the last World Cup when Argentina won, and the U.S. men early showed some life, and they got to the knockout round in the World Cup, didn't they? Didn't they make it to the? Yeah, so they actually showed. Now everyone knew that. Look, they probably have no chance to win. Like, they're not on an Argentina level, but the fact that they even were competitive, and Pulisic was out there gutting it out, and that's the other thing.
Taking a shot off his balls.
Right, you have a star now in Christian Pulisic, who is not just a great American player, but a great player at large. And so having that young star, and now you got some other guys I see that momentum building, but to have that real breakthrough, I think that's the last step, is you need the men's national team to start kicking some ass. And that, I think, will really elevate soccer even more in the United States.
I think just consistently making the knockout stage in the World Cup for a while, no matter where they finish, whether they get knocked out in round one or, they make a Final Four or whatever. I think, and this is the thing, we're Americans, so it's Ricky Bobby, second place is the first loser type of deal. But in soccer, I don't think it's really fair to measure it that way, just giving how far ahead the rest of the world is in the sport. I just think there needs to be some recognition that, for a long time, the U.S. men especially were, I don't want to say a laughing stock because that's not fair to the men that played, but they weren't competitive at the level of the elite teams. And now I think that's a fair, more accurate statement. But now, having a top 10 team in the world, having some, when most of your players are playing on European clubs, at the highest level, whether that is, Bundesliga or, Champions League or whatever, it just gives you a much better chance. So I don't know, man. I get excited about it because, you're right. I mean, for soccer to ever be popular, it's great that the women's team has won a lot. And I made that whole point about the world is because, yeah, that's why the U.S. women have always won, because we actually have infrastructure and support them, even to the pathetic degree that we did. At least they, had the opportunity through Title IX to go to college on a soccer scholarship. So they had something to build for and play for. And what a surprise when they played against China, who has no care in the world about women's soccer. They won 18-0. Like, yeah, that was probably going to happen. But also you see, I know I'm going on and on about this, but you have seen lately that it's actually a good thing that the rest of women's soccer has caught up to the U.S. women. Like in the big view of the world, that's actually a really cool thing.
Yeah, it makes it more competitive too for Team USA. There's actually a chance they could lose. All right, Brian, let's turn to the world of entertainment. House of the Dragon, episode 2 of the second season was out last night. You and I both loved the first episode, I think it's fair to say,
Yeah.
including, and I was not as big of a fan of the first season as you, but I'll tell you, I think they're 2 for 2. I think they nailed it again. Spoiler alert as we talk about this. What'd you think of episode 2?
It's more just not mid television. Like, I feel like it's really well acted. I thought the gentleman who plays Aegon, the king, I think he's really breaking out here. Very his performance is great. I mean, to humanize someone who has his backstory is pretty impressive. I thought that was I thought he did a tremendous job with that. And I think overall, I mean, the one thing I will say, I looked at my wife after the episode ended and I was like, can we start fighting dragons already? That was my only complaint. But I mean, I'm quibbling here, but I feel like we've been building up now for a season and 2 episodes. We got 6 left. Let's shed some blood.
Oh, is there only 8 this season? 8 episodes?
Yeah, there's only 8. Budget constraints, HBO.
The thing I like about this show that has shown me that it's arrived is I've loved these 2 episodes and they haven't used the dragons much. I mean, there's been some cool scenes with the dragons, but they haven't been fighting. They haven't been breathing fire. So to me, like, I think this is a show that's matured and hit its stride. And I think that's for a couple of reasons. I think part of it is because they did a season and they found out what worked and what didn't, and everybody got more comfortable in what they were doing.
The AI machine, they told what people liked, what they didn't.
Right. But also, I think the story caught up to what. The show caught up to the story. In the first season, it was a lot of prologue. Some of it was done well, I thought. Some of it not so much, but it was just a lot of prologue.
It's like the episode 1 of Star Wars when it's all politics, and we're like, all right, where are the lightsabers?
Right. And in this season, they've really gotten down to it, but they've gotten down to it in a way where the main story is still about the characters. Because like dragons are cool, but if it was all dragons and nothing else, would be like, well, come on.
I mentioned the performance first before I made my sarcastic wit.
And his performance was great, but I loved, and also there was another great fight scene at the end where the 2 twin brothers killed each other. Arik and Eric, yeah. But the thing I really loved about the show was the quieter moments in this show. The scene with Aegon and his grandfather Otto, where he stripped Otto of his role as the hand. I thought that was really well done. And I think those scenes, letting the internal dynamics play out, like, give us a sense of this world. And that's what, in the first season, it was a lot about, okay, here's what's going on in the palace, which is cool. I like to know what's going on in the palace, but let's show us some other things too. And they did that with the Eric and Eric storyline, with the guy who was the iron merchant, the iron merchant, who there was a scene with him and there you go, with him and his family. There was, you saw some other things in this episode that I thought worked really well. So I'm excited about this season. Like, I think the show has really improved from season 1 to season 2. and I'm anxious to see where it goes. I really don't have many complaints. I think if I had any issue with the show, it would just be a little bit more humor. Like I feel like one of like because I was thinking about this the other day. I'm like, okay, now that the quality of this show has caught up to, in my opinion, to a pretty high level, why do I still not consider it to be on a Game of Thrones level? And I think the main reason is because there's no Tyrion.
Yeah, there's
And
no there. Yeah,
I don't mean him necessarily
no, you
specifically,
just
although
mean
I
his
do
character.
his kind of character,
Yeah.
right? And you had several people like that. You had the big tall guy, forget his name, and you had that sense of
Oh,
humor and that
Bane.
wet Bane that was mixed into the show that made it kind of endearing. Because look, they're doing something that's kind of hard. They don't have in this show classic heroes. Like the thing about Game of Thrones, for all of its genre breaking, which there was a lot of, which we both loved, and that's part of what made it what it was. It did have traditional heroes. Like the reason the Ned Stark beheading hit so hard is because he was a good guy. He was the hero. The reason the Red Wedding hit so hard is because that was the good guys getting killed. And that they don't have that really in House of the Dragon. There
Well, no,
aren't
you have to pick. It's
really
kind of
good
like the
guys.
election. You really don't like either side, but you got to pick
Right.
somebody.
And I want to be clear, I don't mind that. I think that is a cool thing about this show. And that's one of the reasons the Aegon performance was so good.
Oh, yeah.
Is because that character had been up until this season kind of irredeemably bad. There was really nothing good about him. And then in the first two episodes, you still see the bad, but now you see the humanization with the loss of the son and the grieving. And so I don't mind that you don't really have quote unquote heroes in this show. I'm fine with that. The world's messy and this show's messy. But I think to also, and on top of that, not have much in the way of humor or light moments or brevity, I think that is a bit of an issue when you're comparing. Again, does it mean I don't like the show? No, I love the show. But I'm saying if you're comparing it to, which I think is natural to compare it to,
Sure.
the show that it is the prequel to Game of Thrones.
I like the Tyrion character, not just for the humor, but he was the underdog that you cheered for. Like, not just because he was a little person, though that certainly played into it. But, he just kept getting beaten down and dealt bad hand after bad hand. And like to watch him overcome those bad hands was something that you could like cheer for. And so, humor, you mentioned humor, that was important, but I think that also matters because is there a character on House of the Dragon that you cheer for? Because I don't have anyone that I cheer for.
I think I don't think they do right now. I think there are a couple that are capable of it. I think Rhaenyra's kids, like Rhaenyra's son and his wife, I don't remember their names. They had a scene together. I feel like they could be those characters. Like they could be the two that you're like, okay, these are the two that I'm rooting for. But they've been very minor players in the story, up until now.
Yeah, I think, you had Jamie and Cersei who were horrible people who did horrible things. But by the time that show was so well developed, you like cheered for them at some point, which is crazy with Cersei, doing the walk of shame and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I guess at this point, I'm just going to have faith that those characters will appear at some point. I know it's kind of weird, but I have not really liked the character of Otto Hightower prior to this episode. And I mean his character, but like with him being dismissed as the hand and everything that's going on, part of me was like, poor Otto.
Well, and he's such a good, I don't know.
He's a great
that
actor.
guy's, he's so good. He is so good in this show. He and the guy who played Viserys, the now deceased king, they were both so good in season 1. And so, yeah, he's really good.
Yeah,
I did have
great.
one question because so I was confused in the Eric and Arik battle at the end. So who won the battle and then killed himself? Was that the High Tower?
Arik worked for Alicent. That's how I remember that. Arik is with Alicent, which is Team Green, the queen.
Team Green.
And Eric, like yourself, though I don't know the spelling, might have put a CK on there.
I think he's Eric with 2 C's.
Oh, with two
When I was watching
C's?
the closed or two E's. When I was watching
Oh,
the
two
closed
E's.
captioning, it looked like there were two E's.
That's interesting. I that doesn't make any
So
sense.
who
That would be
won? Who
Eric.
won the fight?
Anyone. So Eric won the fight. He was able to disarm Arik, and then Eric killed himself out of like shame.
Shame that he had allowed his twin
Yeah.
brother to. Which, by the way, people shit on Kristen Cole for that plan. I'll tell you, say what you will. That
You know, if the
plan
guy
was
would have just not said anything, if he would have just
well.
walked over there and then been like, "How you doing?" and whacked her
You're
head off, we
right.
all would have been fine.
Well, and or if what's her name, the whore slash whisperer wouldn't have seen him getting off the boat, then that would have been a different situation.
Yeah,
too.
you know, the Parent Trap plan, I was never a big fan of it from the beginning, only from like strategically, and this is way too in the weeds. It just has a high probability of failure.
What do you mean the Parent Trap plan?
The Parent Trap, where they switch identities, like the twins, like
Oh,
one
like the
parent,
kids
one
movie.
kid. I believe
Yeah.
Ashley and Mary Kate Olsen redid the old Parent Trap at one point. It
You
wasn't a
would
great
know.
film, but it was a film that took place. That happened. I'm sure it made money. But that's what I mean by the Parent Trap. Like, we're gonna have these twins switch places, and they're gonna go under different sets of parents. But anyway, I just think it had a very low probability of success. But at the same time, you only lost one man, and you're already at war, so maybe it was worth a shot. I don't know.
Well, yeah, it was worth a shot. You almost hit the jackpot. I mean, you came really close. By the way, Eric, Erryk.
Stop it.
That is the non-traditional spelling.
Stop it.
And Arik, Arryk. So
of course it is. All right, George. I mean, he's writing a big world. He's going to do some things like this. Do you know the names of the nephews and the Tullys from the books?
No.
God, they are Kermit Tully, Elmo Tully, and Grover Tully.
I love it.
Little George R.R. Martin. He's got some humor.
Yeah, he does. Okay, Brian, any other reviews this week for us?
I'm now on my 13th episode of The Boys, which is a superhero show on Amazon Prime. And I don't know how I've missed this show, because it is everything I have ever wanted in a superhero show, in that it mocks everything about superheroes and society. It is, in my book, an A+. I would give it a 9.5 out of 10. The acting, but it's not just the acting. It's not just the acting. The writing on that show. Just having the idea to even make this show and get it made at Amazon. I mean, dude, you have to watch this show.
I've heard good things. It's kind of on my list of shows that are on the periphery. Like, I haven't started it yet, but I keep thinking, oh, if I have some downtime, that's the kind of show I want to start. How many seasons are there now?
They're in their 4th season now. I believe there are 5 or 6 episodes in the season 4. So by the time I get there, season 4 will be over, but it is planned to be 5 total seasons, which is another thing I love. I love when a show knows it's going to end, because it lets them tell the story how it was intended. So that's once I read a little bit about it, and once I found out they were going to do a 5th and final season and it was going to get made, I was like, all right, I'm going to do it.
I have a couple of just minor. I'll hit them very quick. Episode 4 of The Acolyte, the Star Wars show on Disney Plus. It did not get better, unfortunately.
I'm sorry, man.
Unfortunately, episode 4 was just as bad, arguably worse than episode 3. Wow. I mean, look, the first 2 episodes were a mirage, because they weren't good, but they were like, I guess I'll try it. But it's really fallen off a cliff. Like, the seams you started to see in episode 1 and 2, the garment has just come apart. I mean, the acting is so bad. The writing is so bad. It just is amazing to me that you can't find, like, it's one thing if you have a bad plot, which they do, the plot actually is the best thing about the show. The plot is actually somewhat interesting. Like, the idea of the show has merit to be made. I don't know if it could ever be a great show. Like, I'm not saying it's some ingenious idea, but I think it could have been a good show. But it just is amazing to me that you can't find better writers and better actors for a fucking Star Wars show on Disney Plus in 2024. Like, what are we doing?
It just
How
goes
can
to
the
show you,
writing and
buddy,
acting not be better?
you need more than an idea. Because I had an idea for a movie that was me and you out on the front porch of your old home at the 5 Points, doing what we did when we were teenagers, 18, 19 years old. I think there was a lot of good stuff there, but it's just an idea. And as you can tell, it just really turned into this podcast. So
30 years
it
later,
needs more. Like, it can't just be an idea.
Yeah.
Like, I
You
have
need
like this whole
execution.
Goodwill Hunting thing going on, but you need that's my point. You need to execute it. And it
Yep.
has to be bigger than just the one thought.
And they did not execute. Now, I sadly will keep watching, I think, just because I've seen every episode of
That was my
every
next question.
live action Star Wars show. So I think I'll hate watch the remaining episodes, but I'm not 100% sure, but I think I will. A couple other shows, or just one other show. We talked about this before it debuted, and I've actually checked it out. Clipped, which is on FX show on Hulu. The story.
Oh,
of
yeah,
the
yeah,
Donald
yeah. You watched it?
I watched the first two. It is bad.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought it was going to be good.
It's not quite Acolyte level bad, but it's not good. I watched the
Ed
first
O'Neill,
episode.
no bueno.
I like Ed O'Neill as Donald Sterling, and I like Lawrence Fishburne as Doc Rivers.
Okay.
Like, they do their best. It's a couple of pros doing their best with a show that is just kind of a mess. Here's the thing. The story is kind of silly if you think about it. You have this old owner with this young woman who's a really kind of a weird
out there
V character who then leaks these audio tapes where he says some racist shit. We know the story. If you're going to do the story, you have to do it at a level that gives me something that's interesting or noteworthy or seems really well made. And they don't really do any of that. It's kind of like there's this weird social media thing they do where they have like a scrolling feed come in for part of the show. And I guess it's trying to show you like, oh, this is the world we live in now. And this is why it became a big story. But they play it as farce. And look, you can do that, but you really got to hit it. Like, if you're going to play a story really as kind of, this is just a farcical story and we're not going to really take it that seriously, then it better be really good. And this just isn't.
I'm sorry, man. I had visions of Winning Time dancing in my head.
That's a good comparison because I think they're trying to do a lot of the same stuff as Winning Time, but the execution is just not there. Everything from the writing to the flow of the story to also even like the basketball scenes. The basketball scenes are clunky.
Oh, that's not good.
The act, and a lot of it is the writing. I mean, the writing really let them down, and it's just really the writing, I would say, borders on poor on a lot of the scenes.
Not good.
Yeah, so I did watch the second episode to see if it would get better.
What's the rating?
Through the first two, which is probably all I'll watch, I give it a 3 out of 10.
Oh, that's a no watch.
3 out of 10. Yeah. But I want to be fair. I've only seen the first two. So there are more.
So it's going to turn into Godfather 2 is what you're saying?
Maybe
seems unlikely.
Also, I finished The Righteous Gemstones, which is 3 seasons on Max. My wife and I watched it. It's fine. It's basically the same jokes over and over again for 3 seasons with a mix of trying to be serious. I will say, unlike other shows that I've mentioned here, it's really well made. You can tell that they put a quality of craftsmanship into it, even though it's a ridiculous, silly comedy. And so I respect that. And I respect John Goodman.
I was going to say, has John Goodman ever been in anything bad?
Right. So I would not say this is bad.
I mean, he made King Ralph amazing.
What I would say is it's tedious because it's a lot of the same kind of jokes and plot points over again. But if you're looking for there are worse things to do. If you're just looking to kill 30 minutes and you just want something light that you don't really have to think about, I give it a 5 out of 10. It's fine.
Wow.
It's fine.
It's much more acclaimed than the 5 out of 10 than you gave it, but it's your list.
I really liked the first season. I really did. The first season I would give like a 7 out of 10. The last two dragged it back to me to like a 5. But again, there's a lot worse stuff out there. I mentioned a few of them, the Acolyte and Clip, and there's a lot better stuff. Certainly we talked about House of the Dragon. The Bear starts this week, which I'm excited about. So maybe I'll talk about that in next week or the week after. All right, Brian, that's it for today. Give us any final thoughts you have today.
I really hope that people don't think I'm the devil, man. You know,
Too late.
I'm just a bad guy.
You're a naughty
burn
boy.
in hell.
Wow, we already knew that. No, I think what you said is absolutely reasonable. Now you come at it from a non-religious perspective, as do I. I grew up Catholic and went to Catholic school through 6th grade and was an altar boy into high school. But now I'm not religious. So we come at it as non-religious people. But again, I don't think you have to be a non-religious person to see the problems with blatant religious documents and doctrine in public schools with young, impressionable kids. Like that is just in America, land of the melting pot. No, that's just a bridge too far.
I just think it's hard because I'll just I guess my final thought is that there are so many things out there now that like really attack religion. And I also think that by taking that avenue, you're really hurting and harming a lot of people, because I don't want people who are religious to hear someone say something and be like, oh, this person thinks that I'm stupid or I'm a fool. And that's why when you have certain arguments to get religion and you come at it that way, I think you really hurt people more than you're trying to help them. I guess I ask for the same thing all the time, which is I wish people had more of an open curiosity, like the ability to say like, hey, I've been told this thing my entire life. Like, I'm going to stop and question it. And that doesn't make me a bad person to like really do that. But, I really went back and forth on bringing this up as a topic of the show. I guess I'll listen back and see how I feel, how it went. So I thought it was a cool thing to talk about anyway.
Yeah, look, it's a big story. It got national attention. Trump talked about it, said he loved the 10 Commandments, and we all know there is no greater adherent to the 10 Commandments than Donald Trump. So, I mean, if he's giving it the seal of the approval, and by the way,
this is what I mean.
You mentioned being a fool. I just want to be clear. You can be a fool whether you are religious or not, and I have run into many people in both camps. So being religious does not make you a fool.
Well, obviously, that's what I'm saying.
But you can
like when people are negative about it, man, they become condescending.
Yeah, right.
And I don't want to. I don't want to do that.
Well, we try not to do condescension here, but if we do, please
take no offense.
There you go. For Brian Johnson, I'm Eric Messersmith. Thanks. We'll see you next week.